What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Big Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Brinson. I'm your host. It's a press coverage show. We break down a pressing issue coming out of week 13. We do it every week, Monday, 3:15. Joining me, or 3:20 now, sorry. Joining me to break it down, Tyler Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
What's going on, Will? How you doing?
I'm doing good. First of two shows with you this week.
That's true. Yeah. You got me tomorrow, too.
Yeah. Katie Mock's joining us, too. Big Niners fan. Would have made sense to have her on today, but whatever. Because we're going to talk about Jimmy G and his leg and his injury. There's like a bunch of different layers of this onion, right? The first being the pretty obvious one. Jimmy G suffered a broken foot. It just stinks. And you're probably a Jimmy guy, right? I mean,
Oh yeah,
yeah, like Niners fan. I mean, Patriots fans, people who follow the Patriots. By the way, I like your festive lights back there. Nice work.
Thank you very much.
Maybe I'll do that because my tree won't fit up here. You root for Jimmy G. I think it's easy to root for Jimmy. And he was a good teammate all offseason. He did what he was supposed to do. He didn't throw a huge stink that Trey Lance was the guy. He supported him. Trey Lance gets hurt. Niners never traded Jimmy. They got lucky. They brought him back on a new contract. And Jimmy was playing some of the best football of his career. And the Niners were rounding into one of the best teams in football. They got a ton of skill position guys, a great defense, the best defense in football probably. And then Jimmy suffers a broken foot, and now it's Brock Purdy. I mean, I sort of wonder, from a Jimmy perspective and a Niners perspective, where do you move this team? And feel free to expound on any, Jimmy-related thoughts.
Well, what I find interesting is because I do the early odds piece for the site too, and you're just looking at it from that standpoint, and you look at their future odds and all of that, they're still 9-1 to win the Super Bowl, better than the Bengals, right there with the Dallas Cowboys, better than the Minnesota Vikings, better than the Miami Dolphins. It didn't take that much of a hit. And even the line next week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers it was like a 2-point swing. It wasn't like it was this massive swing into the other direction of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like we saw with Baltimore and Pittsburgh next week, where it's completely flipped. Now Pittsburgh's the favorite at home going against the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson injured. So to me, I found that really interesting just from an odds maker standpoint. They're not putting as maybe much value on losing Jimmy Garoppolo as we may appear to actually be, which I found interesting.
Yeah, and we saw that too with Stephen O, and we talked about his projections on the podcast, the recap podcast on Sunday night. They only go from 11.3 wins to 11 wins.
Yeah.
And they only go, now the Super Bowl odds dropped like 2.7%, which is a lot given, where they were, but they're still, they don't crater off. Like there's a lot of teams where I think if you took out the quarterback, it's complete crater city. And that's not saying anything about Jimmy at all. It's more saying that projection systems, which are also used by Vegas to make Super Bowl odds, are inherently going to look at this. They respect the Niners roster. They respect what the Niners have around whoever's playing quarterback. And, I sort of wonder, maybe I was selling Brock Purdy a little short on Sunday night. Ryan Wilson was propping him up. I sort of went back and watched some of the way the throws he made, and there's some really good throws that he made. And he's got the confidence. He's the last pick of the draft, so you don't want to get too hyped up about it and suggest that he's just going to come in and be just as good. We've seen, I know the Niners, you look at the record, 9-29 without Jimmy under Kyle Shanahan since 2017. You can see it on the screen if you're watching youtube.com/pick6. But Kyle Shanahan's had success with other quarterbacks too, he's I mean, I realize that 9-29 is not a great number, but I mean, he has had he's made other quarterbacks look good and perform at various times. And with Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, that offensive line, his play calling, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Brock Purdy could end up playing fairly well.
I think this is more of an eyeball test analysis with the 49ers as opposed to what we're looking at here with the stats a little bit, because when you do watch this team, I know what you're saying. It doesn't feel like there is a huge drop off, and that may sound disrespectful to Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't mean it to be, but it doesn't feel like this team loses a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow or Josh Allen. It's not that type of a situation. And so you do have a little bit more confidence that they could keep it afloat as opposed to another team like those teams I just mentioned. And the other variable here is, you're talking about Brock Purdy, but there was a dude that just got put on waivers today in Baker Mayfield. So you never know what is going to happen here when we start talking about who is going to actually be the quarterback for them going forward. It would probably be Brock Purdy going forward, but who knows? Maybe they get Baker Mayfield and then it's, they groom him over the next few weeks. It would be interesting. But ultimately, I still feel a little bit more a little bit confident in the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, if it is Brock Purdy, that they'll be able to make it work. They're not going to make him throw these super low percentage, difficult, experienced, high-level throws on all three levels of the field. It's going to be passes to the flat, bubble screens to Deebo Samuel. The air yards are not going to be that high for Brock Purdy, very similar to what we saw from Jimmy Garoppolo at times. So for me, that sets you up a little bit more for success than it would be if you lose Patrick Mahomes and you play somebody in to be Patrick Mahomes. You put somebody in to be Jimmy Garoppolo, it's a little bit easier of a task.
Yeah, I mean, even the sort of the idea of Jimmy Garoppolo, and if you want to extrapolate a little bit further, like with Tua Tagovailoa and that Mike McDaniel system, which was born out of the Kyle Shanahan offensive system, is that the person just needs to be a point guard and distribute where Kyle tells them to throw the ball. That was almost some of the argument of why did you draft Trey Lance when you could have sat back and taken Mac Jones anyway and just used Mac as the point guard in your offense, where he probably would have been pretty good. Now, don't get me wrong, like we don't need to talk about Trey Lance, but I mean, I do think it's like you're not asking somebody to come in and replace Carson Palmer in a Bruce Arians offense where everything is a vertical shot play, or to your point, you're not asking somebody to come in and replace Patrick Mahomes. And we've seen Chad Henne step in and actually be okay in Andy Reid's system. So I think something like that could work there. For me, it's more like, Jimmy is a really good fit in a Kyle Shanahan offense. And we've seen Jimmy play really well for different lengthy stretches in this Kyle Shanahan offense. But because it is, and again, this is not a pejorative statement. It's just, it's a system quarterback. Everybody's a system quarterback. But if you operate in this system and you operate well in this system and how to, the limit, your own limitations and how to make quick decisions and to, like that touchdown throw to Christian McCaffrey from Purdy, that was a great decision. And he threw it, like he got rid of it with anticipation ahead of McCaffrey. Like a lot of quarterbacks might've been shy to pull the trigger and wait till McCaffrey sort of it's kind of like a Texas style route. Like, until he actually cut and started turning, Purdy got it out. And by the time McCaffrey's turning around, that ball's coming into him. It's a really good throw, really impressive. And so I think that, I think that there is a chance that the Niners can, make a good push. I don't know that they can go win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. So that's why, at least, not that Baker Mayfield, I think, can win a Super Bowl, but I would at least be interested in going out and adding Baker Mayfield. Josh Johnson, by the way, already added to this roster.
And so the other thing is too, like what you were saying too, you don't think you don't want to necessarily bring up Trey Lance as part of the discussion, but I think that this is a huge piece to it that's going a little bit underrated. I mentioned it on HQ last night when me and Wilson were on there. This is the whole reason why you moved off of Jimmy Garoppolo in the first place. The whole reason why you made this blockbuster deal to trade up into the NFL draft to select a guy like Trey Lance was because you've come to conclude over the time that you've had Jimmy Garoppolo, for whatever reason, his body just can't go through the trials and tribulations of a full regular season. I mean, you go into 2017, 5 games, 2018, 3 games. The 16 games he played in 2019, they were in the Super Bowl. The next year, 2020, 6 games. Last year, you were in an NFC title game. He played 15 games. It felt like after 11 games played this year, they were on their way to another deep playoff run, but the injuries get into the way. So to me, that's almost a reinforcement of why you made the move that you did to go get Trey Lance. Now you could question who they should have taken at that spot, but the fact that why the motivation to move up into that NFL draft to get a quarterback almost is a little bit solidified here with Jimmy Garoppolo getting hurt again in a weird way.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Like, you could say that, Like, the Trey Lance thing is so hard to even like sort of talk about just because we haven't seen him play at all, and we've seen flashes in the preseason, but it's like it's just so it's like it's I mean I think if they could go back and do it over again, they wouldn't make the trade to go get Trey Lance because of how things have played out. But,
right, but I don't know if it's necessarily because of Lance. I think it's because I don't think they would regret making the trade up to go get a quarterback.
It's not because of his exactly.
I think they're regretting the quarterback that they chose.
Right.
Like you were saying earlier, if Mac Jones is in this offense, it's very similar to what we're seeing with Jimmy Garoppolo this year.
Yeah, and you would feel injuries are fluky, but you would feel okay about Mac Jones being able to survive and sort of operate that. So the 49ers schedule the rest of the way. They have the Buccaneers on the road next week. Short week before going to Seattle on the road. Oh, that is some brutal travel on 4 days. Commandos at home on Christmas Eve. Raiders on the road January 1st. And hosting the Cardinals in week 18, TBD. Seems unlikely that would be the Sunday night football game because they prefer to have ramifications for both teams, or at least serious ramifications for one. You would think that the 49ers will have at some point in the near future locked up the NFC West. I mean, they're still the clear favorites to win the division, I think. Although Seattle's just one game back.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the big question now. I mean, we're talking about them possibly, can they still contend for a Super Bowl? You do have to still look at that division. It's not like the Minnesota Vikings, they got out to this great record and the division's all but locked up. You still have to take care of business. And now I actually think that that's a pretty favorable schedule. I think maybe, as crazy as it sounds, I think maybe Washington might be the most difficult team, depending on what we see tonight with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. But
people are just out on Tampa. It's kind of funny. I think Tampa's like.
I mean, if they get it right, they have the quarterback, they have the offense, they have the defense.
I would be if I were in the NFC, I'd be rooting for the Falcons to win that division or the Saints to win. Sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, but again, still, you look at, who knows if all of a sudden Tampa Bay clicks on all cylinders against New Orleans, then yeah, that becomes the most difficult game. But from what we've seen so far, it doesn't feel like they are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, quote unquote, than what we've seen so far. You look at the rest of it, Seattle feels like they're kind of coming back down. Obviously, going to Seattle is nothing to sneeze at. Washington has been the most plucky, somewhat good football team with Taylor Heineke now under center. Vegas has been up and down. And Arizona just feels like they're going to, kill each other, whether it be Cliff Kingsbury or Kyler Murray at that point of the season in week 18. So it's possible they have a winning record here. I could see them going 4-1. I mean, it really wouldn't surprise me with Brock Purdy at quarterback, especially with that defense.
So looking at just some future odds here, in terms of the division odds, by the way, the Bucs are minus 400 to win the division. So if you think the Saints going to win tonight, go ahead and get the Saints to win that division. That would be the play there. The 49ers are also minus 400 to win the division. Seahawks 3-1, Cardinals 250-1. My goodness, and the Rams off the board. So yeah, San Francisco likely to win the division, but I do think it's worth noting that and 538 has, just because I had it open, has the Seahawks 32%, 49ers 68% to win the division. Niners 88% to make the playoffs. Seahawks 79% to make the playoffs. The one thing I would just say is if the Bucs look okay on Monday night, you got to go to Tampa, and then you got to fly back on a short week to Seattle, and you're doing that against nothing to take two playoff caliber teams. If the Niners were to lose the next 2 weeks, which I don't think I think they'd probably go 1-1, could go 2-0, but 0-2 is not off the table.
No, of course not.
If all of a sudden they're 8-6, I mean, how hard would you be smashing the panic button, knowing that they have the Commanders and then they're 3 winnable games to close out? 2 and 3 gets them in the playoffs.
Well, not only that, I mean, you're talking about losing to a division opponent that now nullifies the tiebreaker, and you have to go into the head-to-head tiebreaker because 49ers won earlier in the season. If Seattle starts if they win, they nullify that. So yeah, no, you're starting to really go down into the weeds. And if Brock Purdy is not the guy, and they can't get a Baker Mayfield, then yeah, I mean, obviously then you start to worry about going up against Washington and that defensive front. And Vegas has been frisky. They feel, they can run.
2 straight.
Of course, they can run, and they have Devontae Adams. I mean, clearly. And then Arizona, who knows? You catch him on a bad day. Cliff Kingsbury's coaching for his job. You never know what can happen. Things can go haywire, obviously. But I do trust the defense. I do trust the running game. And more importantly, I do trust Kyle Shanahan to not put Brock Purdy in situations where he has to win them football games. I don't think that's going to happen.
I'll just say this. If this tie with the Giants and the Washington football team or the Commandos is really throws a monkey wrench in the playoff race, because, for instance, if San Francisco were to lose the next 2 games and Seattle were to beat the Panthers in week 14, I think regardless of who wins, and then Washington beats New York, assuming that, actually, I guess I need to factor in the Philly game too. San Francisco would still be the 7th seed at 8-6 if New York goes 0-2. But if the Giants beat Washington, they would still have, okay, so 8-6 is still in every. But my point being is that if San Francisco lost the next 2 games and Seattle beats the Panthers at home in week 14, which they'll be their favorite to do so, San Francisco's playoff hopes would drop dramatically. Now go win, both of those games, and you're just in the postseason. And Seattle is the one in trouble, but they would move from the 3 seed to the 7th seed all of a sudden, even with a Giants win. My point being is this can get a little tricky for San Francisco. We're all sort of just assuming Brock Purdy's going to maintain the level of play that we saw him have filling in for Jimmy G on a minute's notice, which is
ridiculous.
Right. I mean, he's the last pick of the draft for a reason, and he, as Wilson points out, he played really well 2 years ago. Last year, there's a reason he fell in the draft. That's the bottom line.
Well, I mean, look at Mike White, even in New York. I mean, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns one week, couple interceptions. The team loses the next. It's when you have these quarterbacks that aren't first, second round picks, that's what happens. They're going to be inconsistent.
He's got a lot of experience playing, and we trust Kyle Shanahan. We trust this defense. We trust the skill position guys. We trust him to maybe get the ball into their hands quickly, like you saw, the use check touchdown. It's roll them out, boom, easy read, easy throw. No, easy throw, but a non-dangerous throw.
Right.
That's what Kyle Shanahan's going to do. So these next 2 weeks, man, huge for Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. I wouldn't be that shocked if they claim Baker. I don't know that he might not even make it that far to him. Reportedly several people interested in Baker. I'm not really sure why. But if I were the 49ers, I'm probably putting a claim in on Baker.
I mean, as weird as it sounds, I don't know what the waiver order is or anything like that, but if you're in an NFC contender and you feel like that could be a threat, do you just claim Baker?
Absolutely. If you're the Buccaneers, why wouldn't you claim Baker?
Right.
And block him from going to San Francisco and playing against you in a week.
I mean, we've seen it all the time in our fantasy football leagues, right? That's what happens.
Well, you could also just claim him and cut him.
Right. Exactly.
And then force somebody else to do it, which would be kind of a rude move. But
right. I mean, it's a little bit easier.
Although, actually, if you claim Baker, you have to take on his salary.
Right, but didn't I read that it was $1 million or something like that?
I guess
I'll have to double check, but
it's 18 divided. I mean, it's basically $1 million per week, I think.
Okay.
Because it was the 5th year option. But maybe I'm wrong about how that's distributed, and I'm not sure about the 5th year option in terms of that. All right. Either way, wouldn't be shocking if the Niners claimed him. Wouldn't be shocking if you're right, in Seattle. If you're Seattle, and Pete Carroll is not going to play him over Geno Smith. But if you think that you can block San Francisco from possibly getting him, that reeks of a Pete Carroll move.
So I'm reading this really quickly just because I searched it from Field Yates. It said a team would claim Baker Mayfield off waivers on Tuesday, would owe him $1.349 million in base salary for the rest of the regular season.
Oh, so nothing. Okay.
So really nothing.
Okay, that's how it worked out then. All right. I mean, I think you'll see him get claimed.
Yeah. Oh,
to your point, either by somebody who knows that it's a cheap option on a flyer, who's a guy who's a former number 1 overall pick, or somebody who wants to block San Francisco from possibly getting him on the roster and forcing them to play Brock Purdy the rest of the year. All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. For Sully, I'm Brinson. We will see you guys later.